we can have everybody. We'll call the meeting of the Minot City Council to order. Our regular City Council meeting for today. It is Monday, May 2nd, 2022. It is 5:37. I do apologize for the delay as our previous meeting ran a little bit long. Again, if everyone in the audience would go ahead and silence their phones or electronic devices, we'll try to keep the distractions down to a minimum as we have, I think, a fairly lengthy meeting ahead of us. Roll call, please.
Evans. Here. Janser.
Here.
Olson. Here. Pittner.
Here.
Pajagula.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Sitma.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Number 3 is our mayor's report. I'm going to change the mayor's report up just a little bit and start with our proclamations today, as we do have several of them. But first, I want to also acknowledge Troop 411 from the Boy Scouts of America that are here from Minot, earning their, which badge is it? Citizenship badge. Well, first and foremost, thank you for being here. I'm not going to force you to sit through the entire meeting, but I appreciate you being here to see how this process is all conducted. So thank you. Our first proclamation is the mayor proclaims May 2nd as the Minot High Swim Dive Team Day. Whereas the Minot Public School District is a proud institution featuring outstanding education and extracurricular opportunities. And whereas the Minot High School Boys Swim Dive Team has a long tradition of excellence that includes winning multiple state championships, and continued that tradition in 2022 by winning the state Class A championship this year through a combination of determination, talent, and hard work. And now, therefore, do I, Sean Sitma, the mayor of Minot, North Dakota, hereby proclaim May 2nd, 2022 as Minot High School Boys Swim Dive Team Appreciation Day, and encourage all Minot residents to celebrate the Magicians' 2022 Class A Championship and recognize all the team members and coaches for their season of excellence that shines a spotlight on the successful academic and athletic programs organized and managed by Minot Public Schools. Now, we do have the full dive team here with us this evening, and I'm inviting them to come up forward and the council to come around, and we're going to get a picture with our champions.
Taking a picture with them. Come on. We're going to take a picture with them. Up there. Yeah, go there.
All up top.
Wow, there's a lot of you. Is your coach here? Where's your coach? Oh, okay.
So when we talked about doing this, I'd even given the idea of reading everybody's name. Aside from probably mispronouncing a few of them, I didn't want to take up the entire evening, although you do deserve it for the hard work and the dedication. And as we talked about with City Council, showing an appreciation for all the hard work that goes in, because it also means keeping your grades up and being responsible students, as well as the hard work and dedication. So I'm going to invite the council up here. We'll get pictures with everybody and a presentation. Who's the lead head shaker?
We have to spread out.
Proclamation.
Grant.
Let's see, right up here.
Right here. Are you taller than me?
The old adage goes, if you can't see the camera can't see you.
All right. Awesome job, guys.
One more big round of applause. Thank you guys for being here. And will the seniors enjoy the rest of your senior year? For the rest of the underclassmen, you've got some big shoes to fill. Thank you.
Yeah, big flippers.
Are you guys selling them like basketball was? Griffin, don't forget your proclamation. I'll hand it to you. Your mom wants it.
Should we like be able to get a couple, like?
Your mom wants it.
Your individual proclamations will be available on your way out for you to take with you.
I told them they need a shirt that says Minot High, champions of everything.
All right, as the council takes its seat again, I have a couple of more proclamations here. The City of Minot proclaims May as the Building Safety Month, whereas our city committed to recognizing that our growth and strength depends on the safety and essential role our homes, buildings, and infrastructure play in our lives, and whereas our confidence in the resiliency of the building that makes our community is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire protection officials, architects, engineers, builders, tradespeople, design professionals, laborers, plumbers, and others who work to ensure the safe construction of all of our buildings. Whereas the Guardians are dedicated members of the International Code Council, a nonprofit that unites local, state, territorial, tribe, and federal officials to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect us in the buildings where we live, learn, work, and play. And whereas the Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public and the critical role of our community code officials who assure us a safe, sustainable, and affordable buildings that are essential to our prosperity. And whereas the 2022 theme of Safety for All, Building Codes in Action, encourage us to raise awareness about planning for the safe and sustainable construction, career opportunities, and building safety, understanding disaster mitigation, energy conservation, and creating a safe and abundant water supply for all to benefit. Whereas in observance of Building Safety Month, people all over the world are asked to consider the commitment to building safety, resilience, and economic investment at home and in our community, and to acknowledge the essential services provided by the local, state, and building departments, fire prevention bureaus, and federal agencies in protecting lives and property. Now, therefore, I, Sean Sitman, the mayor of Minot, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2022 as the Building Safety Month and encourage our citizens to join as we participate in the Building Safety Month's activities, pertinent to the Big M building discussion, I feel. Finally, with this proclamation, the mayor proclaims May 15th through the 21st, the National Public Works Week Ready and Resilient. Whereas the public works professionals focused on infrastructure, facilities, emergency management, and services that are of vital importance to the sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being for the people of Minot, North Dakota. Whereas these infrastructure facilities and services could not provide without the dedicated efforts of the public work professionals who are federally mandated first responders and the engineers, managers, and employers at all levels of government and the private sector who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, our water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to the well-being of our citizens. Whereas it is the public interest for citizens, civic leaders, and children to Minot to gain knowledge of and to maintain the ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and the public works program in our community. Whereas 2022 represents the 62nd Annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, Canadian Public Works Association, and with the theme of Ready and Resilient. Now, therefore do I, Sean Sitman, the mayor of Minot, North Dakota, hereby proclaim the week of May 15th through the 21st, 2022 as the National Public Works Week, and I urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in the activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to the public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protect our local, national health, safety, and quality of life. Also pertinent to a recent blizzard where we, I think, had to rely on those folks for a little bit. All right. Out to the mayor's report here for my different activities and meetings. I did have a number of regular scheduled meetings as well as a litany of others. As I had talked about before, we have been meeting on a monthly basis for the community economic activity meetings. Those are continuing. On the 7th, I did attend the Military Affairs Committee, and the 7th was the school board meeting, and that was the TIF decision from the school. On the 8th, I was at Walmart as they have done a major remodel project and cut the ribbon on the reopening. A NAS update meeting on the 8th, Municipal Court, as we were all there to share with the public as the City Council was taking a look at our current facilities and needs. Also on the 12th, Board of Equalization, then for the full City Council. On the 13th through the 17th, 48 inches of snow fell. There was not much going on outside of Public Works and our folks in emergency responders, but during that time that there was quite a bit of outside interest in what was going on, as 4 feet of snow had never fallen in Minot over that period of time, despite what the National Weather Service came up with its numbers. The North Dakota Department of Emergency Services also did reach out and get an update on a little bit on what our costs were. I did attend that Ward County Commission meeting then on the 19th, and also we did meet with some members of the Downtown Business Professionals Association members on the 20th out at Public Works. Alderwoman Olson did attend that, and then the Prairie Warrior auction on the 21st. I want to take just a moment, as the bottom right picture was my contribution to that. But more so to actually talk about what the Prairie Warrior auction is. Funds raised for that go to help with a lot of the different morale activities out at Minot Air Force Base for the men, the women, and their families who serve our country. So a number of different items were donated by local businesses, local individuals, and auctioned off both in live and silent auctions. And to my knowledge, it was probably one of the best that we have seen in a very long time for the public's attendance with that. Normally, we have a great participation from a lot of military men and women from Minot Air Force Base, but there was a lot of the general public that showed up. Next year, I hope to see that number grow even more. And just if you're wondering, that's a petrified wood knife, and it sold for a lot of money. I think they were being very nice to me when they bid that up. Finally, on the 22nd, Minot State University's graduation is coming up. They did have a request in for a number of people throughout the community, including myself, to record some virtual advice that they're going to be playing, not only leading up to the graduation ceremony, but preceding and post to the ceremony at Minot State University, on a little bit of life tips on what to expect after graduation, and maybe some memento ideas for how to find some success. On the 22nd, Minot Air Force Base invited us out for the ribbon cutting on their firing range. That was helped with, of course, a lot of work from Senator Hoeven and a lot of other individuals. Senator Hoeven did, in fact, take the opportunity to fire a few rounds down range, and we even made him hold up his picture because he's not too bad. So it was great to be out there with Colonel Walters, Colonel Menaway, and the rest of the great folks, again, from Minot Air Force Base. As, by the way, they had to go through and do all of their work to prove that they're able to handle all of their firearms outside up to this point. For the entire history of Minot Air Force Base, they have had to go out into the elements when it's 20 below or wait for warmer weather to be able to prove that they're capable of handling and marksmanship. So this is a major improvement out there, and we're very happy to see that complete. On the 27th and 8th, there were 2 different Minot Comprehensive Plan focus groups that I attended as well, and I know this number isn't even correct, but 18 other meetings and more phone calls, emails, and social media and staff interaction that I could probably even put down on paper. So with that, that is the end of my report. I would stand for any questions on that. If not, I do have a couple of appointments under 3.2. Kevin Seehafer to the Magic Fund Screening Committee for the labor position, term to expire on April 30th, 2025.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderman, excuse me here as I swallow wrong. Alderman Ross, second by Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That is the end of my mayor's report. Number 4 is our city manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. As always, the city manager report is included in the council packet, which is available to the public as well. Be happy to answer any questions, if there's any clarification or discussion with regards to anything that was reported in there.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Any questions for our city manager?
If not,
Harold.
if I may, since the writing of the report, we had a public incident with a train derailment yesterday morning. So I would ask Chief Klug to come forward and provide a report and answer any questions regarding that.
Good afternoon, Chief.
I think we're on now.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I've just put some information together. We're still looking into our portion of what took place with the train derailment. But I did get some answers put together, and I think hopefully it helps the public understand that we did everything right. The system just didn't like what we did. So just to provide a brief timeline on what took place, the original call came in at 1:12 a.m. That call was from BNSF. At 1:15, we received a manifest for the contents of the train, but between BNSF dispatch, our dispatch, and BNSF police, nobody really knew how to read it. It's a very complicated document. Basically, the only thing we could make of it was anything in red is hazardous material, anything in green indicates that it's not hazardous. In between that time, the Burlington Police Department was monitoring radio traffic. They heard the call, they responded, and they began communicating with some of the BNSF officials on scene. In the meantime, Burlington Fire made the request for mutual aid to Minot Rural, so they were toned out at 1:27 a.m. The call from BNSF police offering any assistance with reading the manifest actually came at 1:31 a.m., and that's where the first communication with their police started. But it wasn't until 2:17 a.m. that we made contact, and the superintendent from BNSF arrived on scene and began communicating with law enforcement on scene. They were asked at the time if they thought it was a good idea to evacuate. They weren't able to determine right away whether or not there were hazardous materials, so they requested that a 1,500 meter radius from the derailment was activated. The dispatchers at the time, there were two dispatchers working in our dispatch center. They made phone calls to the residents that fell within that 1,500 meter without success. So the next best option was to activate our HyperReach system. HyperReach connects in two ways. HyperReach will send out basically a reverse 911, and it can be done to a selected area. It can be done to a whole city, the whole county, whatever we want it to do, it can do that. So the radius was selected, and that message was sent out. The second part of HyperReach is IPAWS. IPAWS is the federal system that is in place for mass notifications, and that's where we believe in the initial phase of this anyway, we believe that's where the problem came in. So at 2:17, the message went out telling people to evacuate, giving a phone number. The reason a phone number was listed was it was believed that was going to hit 4 homes. That's what landed within that 1,500 meter radius, and they thought, we don't have enough information in the front, so we'll tell them to call us. We can manage 4 phone calls, not a big deal. But when it went out beyond that, it locked up our phone lines, and those started dumping into state radio in Bismarck as well. So posed a large problem. Cancel message, as soon as they started getting inundated with calls, they cloned that message, which means they cloned exactly where it was sent out the time before, and they changed that message to, this doesn't affect Minot. They didn't want to say there's no hazard, because there was potentially a hazard in that radius, but they wanted to make sure that Minot residents that received that call could safely return home without needing to evacuate. So the picture that you see is the area that was highlighted for the hyperreach. That's what they outlined for the area that would be notified. Basically, it would be any residence and any cell phone that's in that circle at the time that hyperreach was activated. And that is what hyperreach sent out. And that's confirmation on what actually got sent out by hyperreach. It went out to those locations, and that was it. The problem was iPause works off of cell phone towers. So when that message went out, it started pinging off cell phone towers, and there were calls that went as far as Logan, Sawyer, Souris. It pretty much hit everybody in our region. And so it's not that the system doesn't work. The system works, but once the communication happens between hyperreach and iPause, we have no control over it. So we're working with both iPause and hyperreach to see if there's any way that we can refine that. It's great that we can send out a focused message. The idea behind that is not to tie up everybody's phone line and only target the people in a certain area. The bad part is the control outside of that is very limited. So what we've started to do preliminarily is work on what those messages would be, how they can be sent out safely with a message that's clear. iPause has a limiting factor of 90 characters, whereas the hyperreach, I think, is 300 and some characters. So there's a big difference between how long your message can be between those two systems as well. So we are starting to look at, is hyperreach the best system for us? Is there a better product out there? Does anybody else work better with iPause? We used Code Red prior to hyperreach and didn't seem to have any major issues with Code Red, but we didn't use it a lot either. So that's just the preliminary report that I have for you this evening, and I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for the chief on his report? Chief, I'm glad to hear that it's being looked into deeply. There was a tremendous amount of outreach right away on Sunday morning when they couldn't reach Central Dispatch. A lot of those phone calls somehow landed on my phone. But of course, I think the overriding concern for some of the folks was that they evacuated and of course didn't know where they were evacuating to your point with the character limitization. But I think the overall, idea or takeaway that I took from it is that concerning that if more of these were to happen is almost that false sense of, oh, it's just another misstep in, the notification process. So I'm hopeful that we can find a solution with either of those carriers that can drive that down. And we certainly look for an update on what those solutions are in the near future.
Mr. Mayor, and I would add that, that it's obviously a concern, and it's something that we weren't even aware would take place. So we're reshaping how we send messages very quickly before we do need to send something else out. And some of that is just a clarification of what people are supposed to do. In this case, we thought it was only going to 4 people. When it went beyond that, that didn't work out for us. So we have learned a very important lesson from that, and we'll change the way we do business.
Other questions? If not, Chief, I'll just add, I'm sorry, Alderman Ross.
How often is the system tested?
We do test, Alderman Ross, we do tests on the system. I guess you could say we run tests because we use that system as our paging system for SWAT, our bomb squad, so we do those tests regularly. But that only tests a direct line to people. Otherwise, there's really no real way to test it without sending out a message, a test message. And I don't know how we would measure the success of that, of who got it and who didn't. And I can say in my own household, out of the 4 cell phones there, 2 got the message and 2 didn't. So it even varied by cell phone at the time. But part of that is as well that it only sends out approximately 3, well, not sure on the exact number. It sends out a batch of messages. So it won't tie up a whole network trying to send out messages. It'll send out a batch of 300 messages, and then the next batch will go out. So as soon as they caught it and they were able to cancel that, they probably stopped that from being an even larger scale call. So they caught it within 2 minutes and they stopped those batches from going out. So luckily they did that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And the last point that I just wanted to drive to a lot of people that contacted me or contacted a lot of the city folks is this is, I think, one of those opportunities for learning on what the capabilities are, and that we're committed to fixing and finding the solution so that something like this, doesn't become problematic if and when it is truly needed in an emergency situation. So, thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Mr. Stewart.
Nothing further unless there's any other questions from council.
Any questions for the city manager? If not, our next item is the city attorney's report.
Mayor, members of the council, Attorney Hendershot has submitted a written report for your review, and I can answer any questions about the same if you have any.
Any questions from the city attorney's report? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us on to our next section of our agenda. This is a public hearing. This is the Crocker move, Tim Keller. And the area that is under consideration for the moving application is 501 36th Street Southwest, Minot, North Dakota 58701, also known as the Teresita Vallejo, First SD Lot 11. The proposed moving location is a vacant lot at the end of 5th Avenue Southwest. The property is surrounded by a similar single-family dwelling as well as a single-story manufactured homes. The immediate area also contains numerous vacant lots. The move of both buildings is part of the City of Minot and the SRJWRB Flood Control Project, Phase WC1. The application stated that the approximately 1,900 square feet of the house to be moved is to be placed on a pre-constructed concrete foundation with an unfinished basement. The applicant also states that the small storage building will be placed on the existing wood floor system and skids. The recommendations to the council are numerous. I will go through them very quickly. A $10,000 completion bond must be posted with the City of Minot prior to the issuance of any permits for the work. The proof that the Crockers have entered into an agreement with the SRJB Water or the Souris River Joint Water Resource Board to take ownership of the property at the new location. And number 2, approve the approach permit assigned to 501 36th Street Southwest issued by Harrison Township. The application and approval of mechanical, electrical, plumbing, building permits for all the new proposed construction. 4, coordinate all relocation activities with the Public Utilities Traffic Authority. 5, approve the foundation design in compliance with the City of Minot building codes. 6, if required, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC systems must be brought into compliance with the current code requirements of the City of Minot. 7, all work on the new location must be in compliance with the City of Minot building codes and zoning ordinances. 8, the exterior of the structure must be consistent color arrangement of colors after relocation. And 9, the property must be provided with proper site drainage and must be landscaped in a manner similar to the surrounding properties. Again, this site is also known as Teresita Vallejo, First SD Lot 23 to 501 36th Street Southwest, also known as Teresita Vallejo, First SD Lot 11, subject to all of the conditions that were mentioned. This is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the proposals that are before the council. Again, this is a public hearing for anyone to come forward and speak either in favor, in opposition, or neutral to the recommendations before us. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council? Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we close the public hearing and approve the item with the recommendations of staff.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to close the public hearing and approve the recommendations of staff. Is there a second? Second. Second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Rajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Abstaining.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to number 7. These are the consent items on our agenda. We had a number of consent, 7.1 through 7.17, so 17 different items. Are there any individuals that need to be pulled for individual consideration? I will look to the audience to see if any one item needs to be pulled for individual discussion. Otherwise, it will be passed as recommended. Seeing none, what are the wishes of council?
Move approval on remaining items.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve all items. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Ross. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to pass all consent items as recommended. Please call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Rajagula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to Section 8. These are the action items. The 8.1 is the 2022 to 2026 Capital Improvements Plan, item 4677. Every year, the city departments submit projects for inclusion into the 5-year Capital Improvement Plan, also known as the CIP. The plan becomes a guiding document for the city staff to program and budget capital construction projects throughout the city. The recommendations to the council is to approve the 2022 through 2026 Capital Improvement Plan.
Move approval.
Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move approval on the CIP deleting the Ann Street Bridge.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson. Is there a second to approve the plan with removing the Ann Street Bridge?
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the motion, Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is not an easy decision to make, and I think everyone up on the dais has likely heard from individuals over the last week or two regarding this, and there's opinions on both sides. And I can appreciate all of the opinions that have been offered. I think when we considered the information that our city engineer shared with us 2 weeks ago, looking at the cost of a replacement bridge. We have to remember it's not the actual Ann Street Bridge, but a replacement bridge. That cost is higher than I'm comfortable with. And leaving it in the CIP, I believe, causes issues with planning for MI6. And so that is why I am recommending that we delete the Ann Street Bridge at this time.
Alderman Pittner.
Just have a question for Alderwoman Olson. What can you expound on the complications with MI6?
The SRJB will be making plans far before the 2025 deadline, or not, I shouldn't say deadline, 2025 projected date for construction of the new bridge. And I feel that when we leave it in the CIP, we are making the indication to all that we would plan on building that bridge. And if the bridge is in the CIP, then the SRJB is going to have to make plans in that regard. So leaving it in makes it difficult and may cost more money in the end. I'm fully aware at this point that we are not funding the replacement bridge at this time, but I think that it just kind of muddies the waters when it comes to planning for the SRJB.
Continue, Alderman Pittner.
Can I get maybe some clarification on that from anyone in the staff as far as complications with, are we not able
Look
to?
for our local representative on the SRJB, and I think on the clarification of complicating is in terms of the cost as they go through and do their engineering on whether or not or what form is going to be put in place for whether it's levee or wall or opening or not opening. and also the footprint that's going to be required. But Mr. Jonason, our Public Works Director, our local representative from the city on the SRJB, please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Alderman Pittner, basically the joint board is just looking for an answer on if the bridge is going to be rebuilt or not. If they are, then we'll need to make some modifications to the existing flood control in that area. You know, looking at where the levees and the ramp systems and everything will tie in, the seepage system to make sure that it voids, you know, when you construct a levee, you have a seepage system. Make sure that it avoids where the abutment placement is, the location of the piers, the spacing between the levee and the piers and the railroad right-of-way, bridge foundations, make sure that they're not conflicting with flood control, and some of the, you know, taking into account some of the levee settlement and locations, and to make sure that when they're built, that settlement wouldn't damage any of the foundations or piers around there. So that's a few of the things that, you know, have to be considered when looking at it.
Alderman Pittner.
So just clarification, are you talking about the foundations of the bridge or the foundations of the levee?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner of the bridge.
The bridge. So if I may continue. So just to be clear, if we were to say we want a bridge possibly 5, 10, 15 years down the road, the levee could or could not be constructed with a possible bridge in mind, saying we're open to this idea.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner, it could be constructed, but we'd need to know, you know, some information. Where are those pier locations going to be?
Continue. Alderman Pittner, and just a quick follow-up on that. Would the SRJB, in your opinion, would they cost share in that, or would that be the responsibility of Minot to pay for whatever that possibility would look like down in the future?
Mr. Mayor, I don't know that I can answer that.
Okay.
It's really going to be a decision of the board. You know, if there is some, I guess, modifications that are made for the bridge, I think an argument could be made to get them to cost share in some of it. But like I said, that would be a board decision, not mine.
Alderman Pittner.
So as far as the seepage systems, that will be dictated by the bridge and not the soil content or makeup, whether it's a footing wall or drainage, like French drain, essentially, if you understand what I'm saying.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner, there's going to be a seepage system. There's always a seepage system along the levees. It's just when you're placing it, you don't want to place it where an abutment's going to be, or you don't have a seepage system that's going to do you any good. It'd be cut off by the abutment. So location of the abutments, you know, for the seepage system, where the levee has to be moved to, just to accommodate all of the different things.
Continue.
Thank you. So just so I'm clear, so can the flood wall, the levee, essentially be moved back with a bridge in mind, so that there's enough room for those footings and the bridge in mind at no cost? I mean, maybe some designing, but we're in that phase right now, just saying we're going to leave enough room. Is the corridor in which the levee is going to be built that tight that we can't just move it back 15 feet so that we make sure that there's enough room in the future?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner, it is fairly tight, you know, depending on where the bridge is going. You know, some of the preliminary locations that we looked at, in order to get the levee or transition to a flood wall bridge in there, and to keep, I guess, a connection of First Avenue going through there, it gets tight without, we're trying to save the property there that has been identified as a possible acquisition. So, you know, it is tight moving around. I'm not saying it's impossible. You know, maybe in this area it'll be, you know, we extend the flood wall and we have a little more flood wall. But like I said, at this time it's just kind of concepts that we're working with.
Okay, so not cost, just concepts is what you need from us.
Yep.
Okay. Just one
more
thing I need to clarify. The Answering Bridge will be removed from not city funds, but that'll be worked into the flood project regardless whether there's a new bridge built in any point in the future. That has to be removed with SRGB funds.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner, yes, a portion of it has to be removed. Burlington Northern has said pretty firmly that, you know, if you're going to remove a portion of it, remove all of it. So I think that's a cost that you convince the joint board that if they're taking down part of it, they would take down all of it.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Public Works Director while he is at the podium? Thank you, Dan. Other discussion on the motion? Alderman Pattagula.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify a couple of things. First of all, I appreciate Lisa's desire to be frugal. I also am concerned about the cost growth. When this was first presented to us in December, the replacement or refurbishing of Ann Street Bridge was $1.6 million lately. The estimate, I think, is 5.4. That's not something I'm willing to spend. I don't think that kind of money. The bridge is worth it. I don't think I can justify that, so I agree with her. I do want to put a little bit different spin on the alternatives. Since last week, I spoke with representatives from two of the engineering and consulting firms involved in the bridge, and it's pretty clear, as Dan told us, that the current Ann Street Bridge really has to go in terms of what the railroad wants and in terms of the flood control project. I think that's a foregone conclusion. What isn't a foregone conclusion is a potential replacement. Now, while I'm certainly not willing to spend $5.4 million on that, several individuals have come to us and several organizations have come to us and said there may be some potential other sources of money, and have asked us not to close off that option by looking for some matching grants or funds by removing the bridge from the capital improvements plan. And I followed up in lengthy discussions with representatives of the two engineering firms, and they assured me that those projects are independent, that we can decide to go ahead with the flood control project, and that would in no way, and the removal of the current Ann Street Bridge, and that would in no way impact a potential future bridge if we chose to go in that direction. There might be a little bit of extra time and money in terms of managing the engineering, but they assured me that they were independent projects and that moving ahead with flood control would not impact a potential replacement bridge and vice versa. Might be, as Dan said, a little bit of an efficiency if they could be planned together, but that they were independent and we could decide on one and it would not affect the other. So because of that, I guess I'm going to suggest that we leave that bridge in there as a placeholder. The city manager earlier presented a potential alternative of some cost sharing in terms of a special assessment. I'm not sure how viable that is or how thoroughly that's been explored, but I think we have at least half a dozen potential alternatives that have been raised to us as potential funding sources, and I think we really do need to look at them carefully, and we need to take the time to do that. I should also note that there is a precedent for leaving something in there as a placeholder. We have a $96 million sewage plant in there for 2026 in anticipation of federal regulations on discharge of waters, and the government has not even started the regulatory process for that, so we have absolutely no clue as to what they'll be demanding or when or what we'll need to do to meet their demands, and yet we have, I think, very nicely put in a placeholder, a very rough estimate of $96 million for the construction of a sewage plant. So I think there's certainly the precedent for leaving something in there where we know very little about the parameters. So from my point of view, I want us to proceed with the flood control project as is. I think we should proceed with the removal of the current Ann Street Bridge, but I would like us to at least leave open the possibility, if we can find the funding, for building a replacement. So I'll be opposing Lisa's motion.
Other discussion on the motion? Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Eric. And I just want to echo Alderman Pattagula's. I don't think anyone at the dais is willing to spend $5+ million on the bridge. I don't think anyone would probably be willing to spend $3 million on the bridge. But without it in the plan, it is not going to happen at any point in the future. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I will be on this council. I know I won't be on this council to make that decision because the funding probably won't be available. But if it's out of the CIP, it's out of our future. It might happen 10 years from now, it might happen 20 years from now, but without it in there, we're saying no. I don't think that's a forward-thinking position for us to take. I think we need to be open-minded to that, the next council or the next council. If the funding becomes available, we've designed flood protection with progress in mind, because we don't know what's going to take shape of the old GOB yard office, the BN, the land that the city's acquiring. This is just keeping progress in mind. This is keeping our future in mind when making these decisions. And I think to leave it in the CIP, give the directive to the SRJB that we would like that area of the flood protection wall to be designed with a possible bridge in mind, a walking bridge, whatever it may be. It probably won't connect to 4th Avenue, Railway Avenue. It might connect just to the green space on the other side. But I think without it leaving it in the CIP and giving that direction, we've handcuffed our community moving forward by taking it out of the CIP. So I too will oppose the motion.
If in fact it were to stay within the CIP, it would also need the directive on to push it back without the funding date certain of 2024, 2025, where it sits now. One of the other aspects of all of this that hasn't been talked about, the existing bridge is coming down one way or another. At the end of the day, it may not even be the decision of the city of Minot on whether or not a bridge is built, period. It will be the authority on BNSF to rule in favor or deny any other permit or application to traverse their tracks, whether it be above or below. And historically speaking, and this is not just in Minot, but on just about all avenues of any pathway to traverse tracks, is they have been denied. They are more concerned with removing crossings, whether it be at grade or above, than to allowing new ones. That is just one of the reasons why that I'll be supporting Alderwoman Olson's motion. The other being, within this community, we dial back to 2019 when the Northwest Area Water Supply Project came out of the courts, and we ended up maneuvering then by previous votes the $4 million that was previously to NAWS, that it was temporarily pushed towards the property tax buy-down and community facilities. That was $4 million, and that represented one of the largest tax increases, property tax increases that the community had seen. And we're talking about more than $5 million, or even if we were to talk about half of that and finding funding through other measures, it still would represent either a very large property tax increase, or it would represent drawing down our fund reserves right now that is also very, very tightly watched with our bonding efforts through flood control and all of our other major infrastructure projects when we go out to bond. For that reason, I will be supporting Alderwoman Olson's. The other side is wants and needs. If we're going to spend that type of money on pedestrian access, where does $5 million best suit its needs? Is it an access point from Northwest Minot or Northeast Minot into our downtown, or is it the miles of sidewalks throughout our community that is also very, very representative of a pedestrian traffic or lack thereof throughout the community? And that has been talked about on numerous occasions. So wants and needs. We have two other bridges that in 2 3/4 or to 3 blocks in either direction also have pedestrian access into that direct area. Yes, while it is not immediately out front in the 2-block radius of where that opening is, it's very, very minuscule in the big picture of things in terms of pedestrian access. There's a litany of things on why I would love to see a bridge there in the future, but when it comes to wants and needs, whether it's flood control, NAWS, or other major spending projects, we do have to make difficult decisions. This is one of those where I can't put into the return of investment on that one bridge to those kind of dollars, even if we were to find grant dollars and other measures to buy that down even to half that cost. Other discussion on this topic?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Alderman Ross.
I grabbed our little Magic City aspirations. Dynamic and prosperous. Minot is a thriving and vibrant community built on the spirit of sharing strengths, a commitment to sustainable strategic growth, and investments in targeted partnerships. Minot is safe and welcoming. Minot is a caring community where people feel safe and engaged with opportunities to celebrate our histories and diverse identities. I believe in this community. I believe in the partnerships that we have today, and I believe in the unknown partnerships that we can build in the future. We've learned tonight that these two projects, they're not connected. They're independent of each other. And to take this project off the table is going against what we've paid a lot of money to work on, our Magic City aspirations. I've said it all along. I am not going to put the cost of this bridge on the backs of the taxpayers. I won't do it. But there's partnerships out there. There are things that we can explore out there that can build a project like this. That can build a connection to the history of Minot. And for those of you who are born and raised in Minot and know the history of the railroad in Minot, let's put it in the CIP or the CAP. And let's let the railroad deny it. But at least they have to make the move to deny it. I'm not going to make the move to deny it. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion. Alderwoman Evans.
So I just want a point of clarity is because I know we've all heard about, from the public about this. When Mr. Stewart mentioned on the dais 2 weeks ago about the option of a special assessment, that's all it was the city manager saying he is asking staff that. Council has not approved a special assessment. I am firmly against a special assessment for this project if we do move forward. This is a citywide benefit and bridge, not on the back of certain residents. So I just want the public to be clear, is there is no special assessment, and that will have to come to this governing body to vote on whether or not in the future, if we pursue the bridge, how we fund that.
Further discussion on the motion to remove it from the CIP. The Ann Street Bridge for clarification on it. Final call for discussion. Alderman Janser.
Just clarification of the motion. So the motion is to approve the CIP with the exception of and removing the Ann Street Bridge. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve the CIP with removing the Ann Street Bridge from the CIP. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Nope.
Quadrigula?
No.
Ross?
No.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
No.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion fails. Alderwoman Evans.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the CIP in its current form.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the CIP, for approving the CIP in its current form. Looking to the motion maker and or to the second in regards to the time frame, given the funding mechanisms are outlined in the CIP in its current form.
Lance, could you come, do we have the exact wording that is in the CIP for the Ann Street Bridge funding? Was it in one of your presentations?
Mr. City Engineer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans. I apologize. What exactly were you looking for?
I'm looking for the verbiage in the CIP that says there's a particular date for the funding of the Ann Street Bridge.
So I believe we have the engineering broken out to start in 2024. I think that's around $600,000 and change. And then the construction funding would come in year 2025.
So we have nothing allotted in the 2023 budget?
That's correct.
Okay, no, I'm sticking with my motion then.
Second agrees?
Second agrees.
Okay. Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
We have a motion to approve the CIP as presented. Discussion on the motion. Alderwoman Olson.
I'd like the city engineer to come back up. Sorry about
Sorry, Lance. Mr. City Engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's been some discussion on possible funding, and you work in this field every day. Can you think of potential outside funding that would be available for a new bridge?
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Olson, off the top of my head, no. I guess if others know of funding sources, they can certainly pass that along to us. There are grant funds out there for certain projects, but a lot of them have to hit certain milestones before they become viable. You know, you could look at things called like the build grant that's run through the DOT. Generally, they're looking for multi-jurisdictional projects that address things like highways, transit, rail. So they want to try to take multiple modes of transit and then initiate a project. Well, this wouldn't hit that. The state of North Dakota does have some historic bridge funds, but generally they're limited to a few $100,000. This is, I think, bigger in scope than what that program is generally intended for. However, we could reach out to the DOT to see if they have additional set-asides with maybe some of the federal grants that they have. But other than that, with the programs that we work with traditionally, we don't have anything off the top of my head that would apply in this case.
Thank you.
Other questions for Lance while he's at the podium? Alderman Pittner.
So Lance, thank you, Mayor. Just so I'm correct, in the purview of the council, next year's budget, this could be pushed back a year. It should be pushed back a year as far as allocating any kind of funding, as far as engineering, designing, things like those?
So, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, the way that this would work, just like all the other capital improvement projects that we have listed in here, at some point we would start moving forward with our work plan. So while we don't have anything budgeted in 2023 as far as funding goes at this time, we would start the process of hiring a consultant probably towards the end of 2023. So we would come to council and request authorization to go out for RFQs. We put something on the street to try to get someone on board, and then eventually hire an engineer and get the project going. So at some point, we'll be back in front of you to keep the process moving if this does stay in the CIP.
Continue.
And just to be clear, as a council, we have the authority to table that for 1 year, postpone it for 1 year in the CIP, correct?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Pittner, you do.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for engineer? Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Other discussion on the motion to approve the CIP as presented? Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to vote in favor of this motion, even though I think we're kidding ourselves. I think that it's you know, it's fine to want to see something happen, but I agree with the mayor's comments about needs versus wants, and I don't see anything that prevents supporters of building a new bridge for raising funds to that effect, to try to do that, or to try to find matching funds. I think to try to find $3 million in matching funds or whatever it's going to take is probably not very realistic. I would also like to have a better understanding of what the citizens of the community think about spending the kind of money that would be involved in doing this on this one project. That could easily be done. We could commission a statistically valid survey to get an idea of what our fellow citizens really think about this project. So I think we should consider some of that and rather than kid ourselves, rather than charge ahead on a course that is going to lead to nowhere.
Final comments on the motion to approve. Alderman Pittner.
I just want to make sure that this is known and very clear that we are not charging ahead on anything. We have mechanisms built within the CIP and within the process for us to take this step by step. And if we choose to move it back, we may choose to remove it from the CIP a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But without it in there, it doesn't happen. And again, I don't want to handcuff any council of the future, any decision makers of the future, with a decision that I'm going to make today.
My final comment would be that this was also proposed before the state legislature during its special session on whether or not it felt that funding was appropriate for the rehabilitation or replacement of the bridge. That did not go through. The exploration at a number of other state agencies, as well as Lance had mentioned, have also come up fruit without any kind of fruit. I'm not going to vote in favor of this plan for the fact that it is kicking the can down the road on this project with enough uncertainty in my mind, and certainly not sending a clear message that we have a clear path forward when it comes to where our priorities at, in my own personal opinion. Final call for comments, Alderman Patagula.
Right. I am not perhaps quite as pessimistic as Alderman Janser is, but I think the odds are not great. What I want to emphasize, though, is that a group of people have come to us and have been coming to us repeatedly for quite a while now, asking us to keep this option open. And they've also generated a list of at least 6 specific, or half a dozen specific potential sources of funding. As best as I can recall, this is the most organized lobbying effort, if you will, that I've been the recipient of. I was going to say victim of, but recipient of is perhaps a better word. And I think if a group of people come to us and have done their legwork, their homework, and come up with lots and lots of potential options, I think we need to listen. I think we need to be open-minded. I think one of the things we're facing as a community is this idea of having to, wanting to, and needing to think outside the box and outside the envelope. And I think part of the reason I want to support not closing the door on this is to recognize the efforts of the people downtown and nearby who have put a lot of effort into this. And I don't think it'll be successful ultimately, but I think we need to reinforce citizens getting together and coming up with alternatives and thinking outside the box and thinking outside the envelope. And that's what we've seen. If a group of people are willing to do that over time, I think we need to reinforce that kind of behavior. I think we need to be receptive to that kind of flexibility, whether it comes to a bridge, which may not have too much of a future, or some other activity. So that's part of the reason I will be supporting this motion, and will be hopeful that we can maybe find some money. I also don't know that we will, but I think we need to look, and again, especially to recognize the efforts of people who have gotten their act together and have come up with alternatives and have done what they can and presented us information that I think is worth looking at.
Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve the CIP as proposed. Please call the roll.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
No. Motion is approved. That takes us to 8.2, the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 28, the rewrite, item 4541. Chapter 28 of the Code of Ordinances governs activities within the right-of-way in public grounds. The chapter covers items such as view obstructions, processions and open-air meetings, care of use of right-of-way, permitting and licensing construction and encroachments. The ordinance has become out of date over a decade, and modern ordinances need to be rewritten that take into account the current city operations, license, and permit needs, and according to the users of the right-of-way. The city also needs to be more nimble when allowing the new users within the right-of-way, such as the shared mobility devices, parklets, and streeteries. The recommendation to the full City Council is to pass the ordinance on first reading, approving Chapter 28 of the Code of Ordinances. Mr. Meyer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to walk you through hopefully a quick presentation tonight, just hitting some of the highlights of what we're doing here. We started rewriting this ordinance in August of 2020, and we are eager to get it off of our plate. We put a lot of time on this, and it's time to move on to something else. So with that being said, what is Chapter 28? It's generally, this deals with our streets, sidewalks, and public grounds, so essentially anything on city right-of-way or city-owned property. More specifically, this gets into administrative things like site triangles and what the superintendent of streets duties are, how we do processions and open-air meetings, use and care of streets and sidewalks with things like, shovel your snow off your sidewalk. We're implementing a new excavation code, which in some form we have scattered throughout the ordinance today, but we're going to consolidate that, dealing with construction in the right-of-way and then encroachments. So why are we doing this? It needs modernization. We have references to telegraph poles in this ordinance. Clearly, if we have that going on, then we have some work to do. Someday they'll probably be joking about telephone poles when they rewrite this 100 years from now, but who knows what they'll have. We need to reflect current city operations. So when this ordinance was drafted many, many decades ago, we didn't have a director of public works, we didn't have flood control, we didn't have a lot of things that we operate the city with today. They're just not reflected, and we need to make that current. One of the more important points of this ordinance is we need more accountability for contractors operating within our right-of-way. We have a lot of stuff going on out there. We have some bad actors. We have some really good contractors. We need some consistency on how we deal with that and some tools to make sure that when the citizens spend tax dollars to maintain streets, we don't have someone come and dig a hole and walk away from it and leave us with a mess. We need to add some flexibility for new uses for the right-of-way, for encroachments, for outdoor dining and seating and shared mobility devices, things that weren't even thought of many years ago that are becoming popular now, and we want to be nimble and be able to implement those if they're a good direction for the city of Minot. So what's changed? Well, a lot. This ordinance probably has, in its complete rewrite format, I wish we could do a track changes to make it really simple, but the entire thing would show up red when you looked at it because it's been reorganized and renumbered, and it just wouldn't be practical to do that. Some sections we've just taken from the old ordinance and copied straight over. That's probably about a third of that document. The other third is probably things that are in the existing ordinance, but they've just been updated and rearranged, and then about a third of it is new text. So I think instead of me going piece by piece by piece through this, which would be extremely boring, what I wanted to do is just maybe hit a few of the highlights on what's changed, and this is more so for the public so they understand kind of where we're taking a few of these things, and then open up for questions. So in our existing ordinance, our view obstruction language was really confusing. It just kind of took you in a big loop. And we've clarified that now and added some provisions for driveways, so that's a lot easier for the everyday citizen to understand without going inside of a textbook. Street naming provisions have been moved to the land development ordinance. We did that quite a while ago. Open air processions, not a lot changed in there, but over time that section became somewhat convoluted as things have been added. So the city attorney's office and I reformatted things, and it's in a nice organized fashion now, and you'll see this consistently throughout the document. You'll have a general section, permitting, you'll have the ability to appeal, and there's revocation provisions in there. So that's consistent and standardized now through that document. Same thing with use and care of sidewalks. We have standardized those sections so they all read similar. We've clarified that people cannot pile snow anywhere in the right-of-way from your private property. That's always been in the ordinance. We wanted to make that point a little more clear. I think that was driven home here a couple weeks ago when we had that much snow. It's hard for our operators to clear streets when everyone takes their driveway and parking lot snow and deposits that in the street. And then we added a provision that's already in Century Code, but we thought it'd be good to put it in our city ordinance that property owners can be special assessed for sidewalk removal if the city would choose to do that. We clarified that property owners must take care of their boulevards. That means mowing and weeding, those sort of things. Clarify that persons damaging flood control are responsible and liable to the city for that. And we've added language now for shared mobility devices, things like electric scooters, and made ordinance revisions to allow that. You're going to see here probably in a couple weeks an MOU come across your desk for consideration. This ordinance just gives the enabling ability for those sort of things to happen. The council still has the authority to approve or deny those as they come in front of them. Our excavation code, so basically what this is, it's how do you excavate and install things within the public right-of-way. We did not have this section specifically in our existing ordinance. We've had pieces of it like permitting and licensing and whatnot scattered throughout our existing document in our standard specifications. We try to consolidate that as much as we can so that it's clear where you need to go for permits and those sort of things, and what our basic requirements are. We modeled this largely after the city of Fargo. Most cities have some sort of excavation code. We thought Fargo's did a nice job at getting across what we wanted to convey. We've updated our licensing standards to require that if you want to do any work in the right-of-way, you have to be a licensed contractor. In our existing ordinance, the city engineer can require a bond, but it had absolutely no guidance. So if I wanted to require everyone to have a $100,000 performance bond to get a license, I could do that. We haven't done that in the past because we really had no guidance. So we are now going to require a performance bond with all new city licenses set at $25,000. And basically what that is if a contractor would go out of business or fail to come back and correct any deficiencies in their work, then we have the ability to use their bond to do those street repairs so that an open hole or excavation doesn't stand open for months and months and months. It is going to cost the contractors some money to do that. We've talked with some local bond agents on what an amount like this may be. It's probably somewhere around $300 a year for them to implement that, depending on their credit and their capacity and those sort of things. We have really no codified warranty period. We do require 2-year warranties on all of the work in the right-of-way. It's on the permit form that they sign and agree. We wanted that codified in ordinance. We've updated indemnity language. We've added a process now throughout our ordinance that has specific language on why a contractor's license may be revoked by the city. We've added appeal language, which currently doesn't exist. And we've added the ability for council to revoke a license for up to 5 years. That doesn't mean you have to do it, but that was the maximum amount of time we wanted to put on that if we would have some egregious issue with some contractors, which we haven't seen something like that, but that ability would exist. We currently don't require any insurance. That's something pretty important. We wanted to put that in the ordinance, so that'll be set by resolution. In our existing ordinance, if you're a property owner and you get a letter from our department saying you have to fix your sidewalk, which a bunch of them just went out in the mail today, you could install your own sidewalk if you have a homeowner's insurance policy and you come and get a permit from us. We only issue maybe 5, 6, 7 of those a year. They're getting less and less. But we have had nothing but problems with that. A few weeks ago, we had to issue 3 stop work orders because people were just removing sidewalks and driveways without permits and weren't following city specs. So we put those specs in there for a reason, to make sure people build long-lasting infrastructure. So now you have to be a licensed contractor to do work in the public right-of-way. That still means you can partner with a buddy that has a general contractor's license and do the sidewalk, but someone has to be a licensed contractor. We've unified and made our permitting requirements more uniform. We've also added provisions for testing within work in the right-of-way. So if you dig a trench in the right-of-way, our city specs require you to do trench testing. That is not happening, so we are going to start requiring that in 2023 with this ordinance. You'll have to take density tests so that we know that the contractor is putting forth the work required to make a good repair in the road. We are formalizing our construction work hours. Informally, it's 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's generally what we put in our construction contracts. That's pretty standard across most of the industry. We're going to put that now in the ordinance so everyone understands what that is, with the caveat that if contractors authorized by the city to work longer than that, if there's a situation that requires, then staff can give that authorization. Traffic control is obviously required now, but we wanted to put that in the code. Same thing with restoration requirements so that people's boulevards and whatnot get fixed after repairs. An interesting fact right now regarding sidewalks, so council can order in repairs, but not new construction of sidewalk. The ability is there in the Century Code, but the way that our ordinance was written, we could address the maintenance portion, but not the new installation. So we're going to clean up that language, and now council has the ability to order in new and repair sidewalks. We are limiting the residential driveway width. Essentially today, it's almost unlimited. If you have a home that has a multi-stall garage, you can be 6 feet wider than the width of your doors. So in theory, if you had the means and the wherewithal to build a garage that had 9 doors across it, your driveway could be 6 feet wider than the width of all 9 of those doors. We have some very large garages in Minot. Good for the folks that can do that. That's tough for us when it comes to snow clearing and other things. So we're going to limit that, no matter how many garage doors you have, to 40 feet at the right-of-way line, or 46 feet at the curb, to try to control that somewhat. We've added some provisions for industrial driveways. You have large trucks with multiple trailers. 40 feet is tough to make that, so we're going to have some exception language in there. And then we have some provisions for redevelopment of properties. If you have unused driveways, they have to be removed as part of that permit. This is a access management thing. Take, for instance, Broadway. If something would redevelop, we're trying to limit access on that, like we've talked before at this meeting. We now have some triggers to help clean those up. A few things on encroachments. Today, permanent encroachments have to be approved by the City Council. We're changing that to be staff approval. So if someone came with a permanent encroachment, staff would review that, approve it, and then we would send a report to City Council every month telling you how many we've approved. If we as staff would deny one, the applicant has the ability to appeal to City Council where you could affirm or deny. And then the revocation requirements are now established in the ordinance. We've taken outdoor dining. It was limited in scope, and we've now expanded that to reflect outdoor dining, streeteries, and parklets. Some of the newer things that we've had downtown, we want to be able to evaluate those things and be more nimble. And so we're taking those provisions, the details out of the ordinance, we'll put that in policy. What will remain in the ordinance is the ability to do those sort of things. That way, if we have something new that comes about that we want consideration of, it's easier for us to amend a policy than it is the ordinance. And these will now be a yearly license. So before you'd get an encroachment permit, it would go on into perpetuity. And now you just have to apply for that every year. So we're working with the Community Development Department to develop that license and that fee, and that'll be in front of you next month, or excuse me, next meeting. We made some revisions to the small cell wireless requirements. We've had a few permits come in from Verizon to do this. One thing that they made a point to relate to us was we are requiring currently, and we basically use City of Fargo's ordinance. We are requiring them to notify adjacent property owners before they would submit a permit. We don't do that of any other utility provider within the city of Minot. And so that gets to be a legal issue if we're demanding that one utility provider do something that the rest are not. The city attorney agreed that that's probably not the best approach, so we've made some modifications to that section that basically gives city engineer the ability to impose conditions if conditions may warrant, but largely that section stayed the exact same. So some next steps. So tonight we're talking about passing the ordinance on first reading. At the May 16th meeting, we'd be looking at passing the ordinance on second reading, and then we're currently drafting a resolution that sets the fees and bond and insurance amounts and those sort of things. So that'll be in front of you as well. And then engineering and community development staff are looking at updating the policies for outdoor dining, parklets, and streeteries. It's essentially taking what we have on the books today, making sure it still works, and then updating those policies to reflect the ordinance changes. The way that we want to approach this change this year, because most of the contractors, they already have a license, they're already doing work out in the right-of-way. The new fees and bond requirements would take effect for the 2023 licenses. So if you have a 2022 construction license today with the City of Minot, we would not retroactively go back and make you supply a performance bond to us or pay an additional fee for your license. Those sort of things would take effect when you apply for your 2023 license with the City of Minot. This will also be an education year with contractors. We want them to understand what the new permit and licensing requirements are and the new construction requirements that we're going to have in the right-of-way, and work with them, educate them so that for the 23 season, they understand what our expectations are. So, with that, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lance. Any questions for our city engineer? Alderwoman Evans, and then we'll go to Patagula.
Hey, Len, where did the 40 feet for driveways come from? Is that like from another community? Why was 40 feet decided?
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, 40 feet was a staff decision. We felt that the width of an industrial driveway should be probably enough. That's 40 feet is currently 4 feet wider than our typical city street.
Okay. And then, but people with existing driveways that are larger than that, they're fine. And then, do you anticipate the outdoor dining stuff and street stuff, all of that to be in place so our businesses can take advantage of it this summer already, or no?
Mr. Mayor and Alderwoman Evans, I do. So
Great.
those policies would be coming in front of you at the next meeting, the
Okay.
updates. It's largely what exists today. I think they've made a few text edits, and that's about it.
Great. And thank you for your work on it. This was a huge undertaking for you and the staff and our city attorney, so. Whew.
Alderman Patagula.
I echo her comments about huge undertaking. The one thing I wanted to follow up on was this issue of processions and open-air meetings. Specifically, I wanted to make sure that my understanding of it was correct in terms of people having to apply for a permit and the city being able to deny a permit. Am I correct in that, or am I misreading it?
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Padragula, we'd probably need to ask the police chief to come up to talk about permitting specifics for those type of events. We don't handle that, but we do have provisions in there to deny a permit. I think it's only if the chief would find that it's a detriment to the public somehow, but he might be able to answer that better than I.
So if someone could, on the legal end of things, could give me a clarification on that.
Chief Klug.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, the permitting is largely used for awareness. It's so that we're aware of what events are taking place in the city. In my history, we've never denied a permit on the police department's behalf. So there is the possibility there, but it would take a lot for us to get to that point.
For clarification on that, Chief, in reference to open-air meetings, you're likely referencing very large crowds that otherwise wouldn't have to pull permits, whereas there may be some safety issues in terms of street traffic and other points, correct?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. It does address smaller groups and what it tries to do is give us the information that an event is taking place that's going to be on public right of way. So they're going to be utilizing the sidewalk for some kind of a protest event, which we've had around town where we've let them do what they need to do, but we're aware of what's going on in case it becomes a problem or it's forcing other foot traffic into the street or that type of thing, so we can deal with it appropriately. But we allow their First Amendment rights, so we don't encroach on that. But we are aware that we can focus on that area with police presence if needed.
Alderman Patagula.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate your openness to people's rights, and I trust you in the current administration completely. And I have no problem at all with requiring citizens to notify the government of any planned protest or activity. I also note that there's a specific exemption for things that kind of arise spontaneously as a result of some event or development in the world or in the city. What concerns me, however, is the idea that the government has a right to control protests and demonstrations. Again, it may seem far-fetched in Minot, North Dakota right now, but to me that's a pretty significant issue, and I am concerned about that, sort of like I was concerned about us using drones for law enforcement and emergency services. No question about the good faith or the goodwill of the people in charge currently, but I wonder about that. I wonder about the government's ability to deny the right of people to peacefully assemble, and I guess I would even ask our attorney if it's been reviewed and vetted by the legal people, and if they see any potential constitutional ramifications, or if I'm just overreacting.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Padragula, the other point I would make is there are events such as the State Fair Parade, there's different biking events, running events. All of those require permits, and those between myself, Public Works, engineers, we make sure that the route that they have chosen is a safe route as well, and that we can monitor it, make it safe if it's not, or reroute them if there's a construction project, which we ran into in with the flood control. They wanted to do a run, and that was the same route that they were using for trucks. So it wasn't a good idea to have runners and trucks hauling dirt and that kind of thing at the same time. So we helped pick a safe route for them to do the same thing. So I guess the city attorney can definitely comment on the legal parameters.
If I could hear from her, and I appreciate that clarification, and what I would envision, I guess, would be a collaborative relationship between any group that's wanting to do something and the city, because you have expertise they might not have.
Good afternoon again, Ms. Dahlhun.
Good afternoon, Alderman Padragula, members of the council. Attorney Hendershot is the one that primarily worked on this rewrite with the city engineer, so I don't have any firsthand knowledge on how much research she did in this particular exemption. But like the police chief noted, there is an exemption for some meeting or procession for a spontaneous event that has arisen in the past 48 hours, I believe is what it says here. So I'd echo the same comments that the police chief stated with regards to a state fair parade that's planned years in advance. So that's something where we would want to have some kind of control over what streets they're shutting down for a processional of that nature. And there's a public safety concern connected there. It's not necessarily something that's arising out of an event that occurred over the past 48 hours. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I can certainly conference with Attorney Hendershot and have her deliver a follow-up to the report, your question at the next meeting.
I guess I'd feel more comfortable with that, because we're talking about assemblages and processions, and I can see if someone's tying up a street, that could be problematic. On the other hand, I think our constitutional liberties are critically important, and this is what I'm focusing on because it's coming to us. I guess I'd like a little bit more clarification there. And again, I'm not in any way impugning the motives or the work of our staff or our administration, but this is potentially an issue.
And Alderman Padragula, I don't believe that this is a new section to the code. It may be fleshed out here a little bit more, but I believe this current concept is in our existing code as is. So if you want to meet with me afterwards and we can kind of clarify what your concerns are and we can look into that more, I'd be happy to look at that for you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Any other questions for Assistant City Attorney before she heads off the podium? Thank you. Any other questions for our city engineer at this time? Thank you, Lance. We are looking for a motion at this point.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve, second by Alderman Janser. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
No.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to 8.3. This is the Edison SRT's CPM agreement amendment. City and North Dakota DOT signed the original CPM agreement for the Edison Safe Route to Schools in 2020. The NDDOT has since decided to remove $290,000 funding cap for the Transportation Alternatives TA project. Signing the proposed amendment would remove the funding cap, which would increase funding from the NDDOT and decrease the local match required for the project. The recommendations to the full council is the approval to the amendment from the CPA agreement with the NDDOT and to authorize the engineering department to utilize the excess funds from the project for street improvements.
So move. Second.
Motion by Alderman Janser to approve, second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Final call for discussion. The motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Motion is approved. 8.4, the replacement of the underground cooling tower piping. Prior to the cooling tower system upgrade from the water to the glycol and the heat exchanger, the supply lines froze and it had to be repaired. Since that repair, a loss of glycol has been happening, and the determination is that the weakening pipe from the previous event with the underground work that will be going on regarding the water main work to the complex this spring, the close proximity to the cooling tower lines, it is the perfect time to complete these repairs and save in the excavation costs. The recommendations to the council is to approve the proposed budget ordinance on first reading for the cooling tower piping replacement and approve the use of general fund cash reserves in the amount of $12,024.
Move approval.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Any discussion on the motion to approve? Any discussion? Final call for discussion. The motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Chancellor?
Yes.
Motion is approved. See, it's catchy. Magic Fund grant to the Souris Basin Planning Council to fund the Business Acceleration Fund. A request from the Souris Basin Planning Council for funding from the Magic Fund to establish a revolving loan was approved at the May 20, 2019 council meeting. The agreement authorizes the funding of $500,000 in 2019 and $500,000 in 2020. That agreement was later extended to December 31st, 2022. The previous funds have been exhausted, and this request would further capitalize the revolving loan fund to accommodate the additional loans. The request was $2 million. However, the Magic Fund guidelines limit the amount available for the RLF to 10% of the balance of the Magic Fund on January 1st of that year. The recommendations to council is the City Council approve the recommendations of the Magic Fund Screening Committee, award a grant to the Souris Basin Planning Council in the amount of $780,000 to fund the Business Acceleration Fund. 2, approve the budget amendment to appropriate the funds, and 3, approve the attached grant funding agreement and authorize the mayor and finance director to sign the agreement. Mr. Finance Director.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you. I just wanted to point out that Ms. Ulrichsen from Souris Basin Planning Council is here, and I believe she has a few slides she would like to show the council.
Good afternoon, Ms. Ulrichsen.
Good afternoon, good evening. It's already
It is
almost
evening, isn't it?
bedtime. It's almost bedtime. No, I'm kidding. Thank you so much for having us. I have Briselda Herrera up here with me too. She's our assistant director at Souris Basin. My name is Lindsay Ulrichsen. I'm the executive director at Souris Basin. And I think it's Alec in the back. Alec, we want to show a really brief video. It's less than 2 minutes for you all.
This is a great program, and it's not something that everyone has access to. That because Souris Basin is here, because there is this Business Accelerator Fund, we can have access to these matching funds through the Bank of North Dakota.
The North Dakota legislature put forward the FlexPace and PACE program specifically to help these businesses.
Individual borrower applies through this program will receive interest buy down on their loan. The only way that this occurs is when the community that the borrower is in has a program available for them to receive those dollars to buy down the interest.
You know, to bring any type of business to Minot and starting out, I mean, it might be the only way that a business can start.
And you're starting to see the impact that this is having.
Kevin Black moved his headquarters to downtown Minot.
Having this program in Minot is an absolute game changer, and in my estimation is probably the most significant economic development tool that we could possibly deploy in this community.
You need that program in order to hear everybody out. Because it might not be a grocery store, it might be a painter, it might be a builder. Anyone that wants to make it as an entrepreneur needs that outlet to openly discuss their ideas.
Also, being in the real estate world, I'd like to say we need more businesses in Minot. We need to be business friendly, so anything we can do to help businesses grow, make it more attainable to start a business here in Minot, bring jobs to Minot. I mean, that's where our core and that's where our growth is going to happen.
Having Souris Basin Planning Council there for you is very important.
City leaders and downtown business professionals that have been supportive of all of our downtown businesses during COVID. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Alec. So we had put this together last year when we were going to come and present to you all about our program, when we were asking for that additional $500,000. Since then, the program has really taken off. You know, we had a speed bump with COVID. People got a little bit nervous about opening a new business, and so people kind of put the brakes on their project for a period of time. And then after that, it was just full steam ahead, and there was a lot of word of mouth. And people really, really like this program. The best part about this program is that we can access these FlexPace dollars from Bank of North Dakota that we couldn't otherwise access prior to this. So I'm going to scoot through these, I think. There, oh. Oh. Alec? Okay, well, I'll keep going. So you have everything in front of you, our narrative that we had created. I don't want to, oh, perfect. I don't want to read to you or anything like that, so we'll try to keep this as brief as possible for all of you, but we put together a few dates on, you know, how we got here when we started this process in 2019, and now February 23rd of this year, we approved enough projects to expend all of that funding. I also included in our narrative a breakdown of that schedule of when those funds are going to start to get paid back to us, when we can start revolving those dollars. But because we cannot accept principal and interest payments until after that buy down period is complete, then there's kind of a 3-year window before we start receiving any funds from our very first, second, and third loans. And so can we go to the next slide, please, Alec? Thank you. Here's just a little bit of a touch. When we applied for these grant funds in 2019, our goal was to create and retain 75 jobs. With this $1 million that the Magic Fund provided to us, we were creating and retaining 305 jobs with these projects. We wanted to leverage $7.6 million, and we leveraged $30 million into our community. And we never ever dreamed that it would have this level of impact with $1 million. So we want to say thank you first and foremost for allowing, it's just kind of taking a chance on us to get that program off the ground and get that going. And here we are now today. What we're looking at with this additional, with these additional funds is about a 14-to-1 leverage ratio. And so that's where we feel like we can be with these additional dollars. And as you know, we did apply for $2 million, and you might be saying, why $2 million? We did stretch that out over the course of 3 years. The intent there was we had these conversations with Bank of North Dakota staff, staff at Lewis and Clark Development in Mandan, who operates the North Dakota Opportunity Fund, and then also looking at the STAR Fund in Williston and looking at the level of activity that those established programs already have. And now that our program is established, looking at the activity that we anticipate we could have as a part of this. So that's why we asked for that $2 million. We can go to the last slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Briselda to just talk a little bit about our existing projects with you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Just to expand on the projects that you saw in the video, a lot of our projects have been in downtown Minot, and the majority of them have been here in Minot. Our goal was to retain the majority of the funding within the community, since funding did derive from the Magic Fund, and we've accomplished that. For example, with Credence, as Kevin talked about or mentioned in the video, what we help with that is for him to acquire that building and renovate it. It houses not only Credence, but it houses Companions for Children, a restaurant at the bottom, and I believe one additional entity within that building. You all know that that building was vacant for quite a while, and it's just brought a lot of light to downtown. We helped with Prairie Skybreads with some of their equipment purchases, and for a very small business that made a huge impact for that business. Wanted to touch on the fund's leverage briefly. Out of that $30 million, about $1.8 million came directly from the Bank of North Dakota in interest buy down. That's interest that's essentially is going to be bought down for all of those businesses, essentially free money for them to reinvest that into their business, allows them to maybe invest in a project that they weren't initially thinking of, make additional renovations, purchase additional equipment. So that is an impact that the Business Accelerator Fund has brought into our region. And again, majority of it has been here in Minot. So I'm happy to answer any questions about those projects or give other examples if you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions at this time from the council? Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Whoever wants to take it. As far as talking about Kevin using funds to leverage into the building, what about businesses that go within that building? Are they still eligible, even though it was used on the building? There's no overlap?
Absolutely. So if Kevin was going to lease an empty shell of space and someone needed, that business needed funds to do the renovations, they would be an eligible entity to apply, yes.
Thank you.
Alderman Patagula.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with what I'm seeing and hearing. I note, however, that you asked for $2 million and the recommendation is to give you $780,000. With the understanding that you can come back later if you need it. Will that lower allocation inhibit your work in any way?
You know, it will have an effect on just having that mindset of knowing we're limited to $780,000. We would never want to assume that we would be approved for additional funding after that. So we would have that $780,000 in our minds. So it may limit the amount of funds that we would want to invest in a project, because we don't want it to be a first come, first serve situation where whoever comes to us first, they get the money and it goes out the door. We want really good, solid projects. So it may be that when these projects are coming in and our funds are limited, we may say we can help, but we can't help to the maximum amount that we previously could.
You have a follow-up, Alderman Patagula?
So I guess I'm still trying to figure out whether it would get in the way of you helping these small businesses, these entrepreneurs.
I think I can speak on behalf of entrepreneurs that they'd be happy being able to access this program, even if it was for a small amount. So we are, at Souris Basin, we're happy with whatever we are able to get today.
So internally, you might need to kind of choke back a little bit.
Right.
But if there were a rush of projects, would you come to us and say, look, we need the money?
We might. Yeah.
And can I add?
Yeah.
Just to add to, because it is a policy limited to that percentage,
Right.
of 780, we have that in mind at least for that first year,
So you could operate the way you're operating now and.
within this first year. Yeah.
Right. And I guess I feel stuck here in a way, because if the guidelines call for a limit and yet you're telling me that might inhibit in some way your work, I'm not really comfortable with that, because I think the reason we're investing in this is to help the community out, to help these entrepreneurs out. Could I ask you to, maybe commitment's too strong a word, but could I ask you to strongly consider that if you're starting to run out of money, that you would immediately come to us and say, look, it's working even better than we expected, and we really would like to ask for some money, more money?
Most definitely, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. That helps me feel more comfortable.
Mr. City Manager.
So I'm supportive, and I'm not surprised by the success that you've had in leveraging private funds and creation of jobs. But I'm going to reiterate a question that we had a couple months ago when we sat and talked about this. So a revolving loan is, when it's healthy, is designed to basically recycle funds and continue to make that money work within your community. What we've run into here is there's kind of a dam, so to speak, in that the availability of funds is limited, and the money is not returning back into the system as quickly as a healthy revolving loan fund would do. And so my question a couple months ago is, what level of balance should this revolving loan fund have? So rather than piecemealing this every time we run out of money, there should be some analysis done as far as what the need is, because we don't want to underfund it, but we don't want to overfund it either, where we put so much money in there that it's not recycling and money's just sitting there not being put to work. And so I haven't received a response to that yet. And so, again, I posed the question and asked what that healthy balance is for revolving loan fund, that this continues to be a valuable asset, but it's not overfunded or underfunded.
Sure. As you all know, everything gets more expensive over time. So we don't want to say it's going to be $3 million and we're going to be set, 10 years from now. But if we can build that initial investment to $3 million and then continue to grow that program after that with the interest payments that are coming in, that's how we revolve all of our other programs. Is we keep a portion of the interest that gets paid for administrative costs, and we revolve all of the principal and a portion of the interest back into that. So it's growing all the time. Our level of need for all of our programs right now is pretty high. We're in a situation right now where we don't even want to print new marketing materials because we don't want to necessarily market the programs because there's not that much money available in them. So we definitely feel like in this short term, 3-year period, we think getting that program to a $3 million balance is what's going to get us to where we can revolve those funds. The funds can go out, and it's okay when they're out for 3 years and we don't get those back for 3 years because we still have funds coming in from other projects.
Any other questions for Souris Basin Planning? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McMartin, our Executive Director for Minot Area Community, or for the Chamber EDC.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the council. I just thought a few clarifying comments. We did work with the city on this, and as part of our contract, we did provide the recommendation to the Magic Fund on the $780,000. On Lindsay's timeline, it noted that the application was made in 2019. Prior to 2019, this program was not eligible. Minot had no flex pace participation, and it was because of the way the Magic Fund guidelines were written. They were rewritten in 2019 to allow for the revolving loan fund. You heard Lindsay say she couldn't believe the success of the program. I think a lot of other people couldn't either. We commended her and Souris Basin on the success of their program. We strongly encouraged them to come back for the additional funding so that we were allowed to follow the guidelines and would be there supporting it with the same kind of success that she had. Do we get to a point where the council may have to make an exception if Lindsay runs out of money in 3 months? Maybe, but that might also be consistently or conceivably possibly a good problem to have, Alderman Padragula. But at the same time, part of that cap was designed to try to help manage the Magic Fund so there wasn't a significant draw all at once. Okay, so those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. McMartin. Any questions? Mr. McMartin, Alderman Padragula.
Just a comment more, John, and that's part of the reason I'm not advocating for more money, because I respect the Magic Fund process and what MADC, RECE, whatever the acronym is these days, has been working toward, and I don't want to upset that process. But it seems like this is something that's working, and it'd be nicer if we had more of a track record. But I think that's something that MAC, EDC and the city maybe need to look at again. I think it seems to me that we've had more success with this program than some of the other things we've tried to achieve through the Magic Fund, and maybe a reorientation at some point in the future would be appropriate after some study. So I guess I would ask you guys to, you and the city manager to track this fairly closely and see, because if people are doing good things, we need to reward that kind of behavior and incentivize them further.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John. Looking for a motion, Alderwoman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prior to making the motion, I'll just state that I proudly serve on the executive board of Souris Basin Planning Council. And 2 years ago, when this project came to us, I was a little hesitant. I really was. I didn't understand it. And having been given the opportunity to serve on their board and see on a monthly basis the success of this program, I wholeheartedly stand behind it. And I also got the sense from the Magic Fund Screening Committee that they support it very strongly as well. They want to have kind of a progress report. So I assume that when the 780 is expended, they'll come back, and I think more will be approved. I really do. I think it's a successful program that needs funding. So with that, I do move approval on this item.
Second.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson to approve, second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion on the motion to approve. Any discussion? Final call for discussion to approve. The motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Olson?
Yes.
Pittner? Yes. Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to our final item in our action items section. This is the contract for towing services. City of Minot has previously awarded the contract with Olson Towing in 2018, and that contract has expired but has been honored by Olson's Towing after receiving written proposals and conducting clarifying interviews with representatives with both companies. It is the recommendation of the Chief of Police to award the contract for a period of 3 years from the date of the signature. The recommendations to the council is recommend the City Council approve the contract award with Olson's Towing and Recovery, Inc. 2, authorize the Chief of Police to negotiate the service agreement with Olson's Towing and Recovery, and 3, authorize the mayor to sign the contract negotiated services agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Pittner to approve, second by Alderman Janser. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor and Council, the reason this is on the action item as opposed to under consent agenda is I just wanted the council to be aware that several months ago, my office was approached by a tow company with some concerns about the openness and availability of this, and asking us to reconsider contracting exclusively for this and looking at other concepts as far as opening it up. The police chief and I did look into this matter. We still felt that the best way forward was to exclusively contract this out, but I wanted the council to be aware of that concern before making your decision. And secondly, that we did promise to that company that this would be bid out openly. They did not respond to the bid process. And also that we had more than one applicable respondent in regards to this contract. So I just wanted you to be aware of those before you made a decision.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Discussion on the motion to approve. Any discussion? Final call for discussion. Seeing none, the motion is to approve. Please call the roll.
Pittner?
Yes.
Padragula?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Sitma?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Janser?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to item 9. This is personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda this evening. I'll just ask that you state your name and your city of residence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of Council, Shannon Strait, 115 8th Avenue Southeast. Tonight I stand before you as a representative of the Friends of the Souris River, and I did just want to provide a little bit of an update to the conversation of earlier regarding the bridge. Earlier today, Mr. Walski, representing the downtown BPA, and I met with 3 officials from the National Park Service. We happened to get lucky. They were in town touring the state with 2 projects, one up around Belcourt and a second around the Mandan, western North Dakota, and they gave us an hour and a half of their time. We toured the flood protection plan, stopped in downtown to take a look at the bridge, and kind of asked for their assistance. We started a conversation. We're not sure where it's going to go, but we did want you all to be aware that we're not giving up. I think you all know us well enough that we're not going away, and it's going to take a lot of people. We recognize the funding challenges you face, but solutions can be found when we're all working together. I think you realize that. I'm a little disappointed that the young men left earlier to, but this is just part of the process. We wanted to provide you an update. And then my second point is, earlier we unfortunately had to reschedule our river cleanup as a result of that great snowfall. And we're gonna hopefully get after that next week. It's probably going to be a series of like after work events, because we recognize now with nice weather, the public should enjoy their weekends. We've partnered with the Park District. Hess is going to be involved. We're still hoping to get some students involved. The downtown BPA is involved. Environmentally minded people of Minot. So what we're going to do is it's going to be a cleanup, one at Roosevelt Park, and then a second around your neighborhood, Mr. Mayor, around Oak Park, and the dead loop in particular around there is pretty nasty right now. So we're excited about that. We thank Public Works. They've been a great partner over the years as we've asked for assistance, dumpsters, and the crew has always been great, so I want to give a shout out to Public Works. And then I also wanted to thank the city manager. I met with him earlier in the week to talk about how we can maybe broaden the river cleanup, citywide beautification projects where we can get a bigger kind of the buy-in from the public. And I appreciated his time and his ideas based on his previous experience. So thank you, Mr. City Manager, and that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Straight. And as you're walking away, I'll also remind folks that we were trying to find a way to reschedule the cleanup out by the dump tentatively Friday the 13th.
Oh, yeah.
Going to be that day. So we appreciate the work on the river, and we'll see if I can make it out there myself.
I was at the dump earlier today, Mr. Mayor, so any ideas you have for that, that'll be appreciated, how we can clean that up.
Thank you. Again, this is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is or is not on our agenda under personal appearances. All right, seeing none, we will move into our miscellaneous and discussion items. 10.1 is the further discussion regarding the locally sorting recycling materials. Our Assistant Public Works Director, Jason Sorensen, has some information.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I don't have a presentation or anything to present. We've been working through this with closed loop partners for about the last month. We looked at input costs, labor costs, and these things. And last week we had a sit-down meeting, and they basically said, no, this just is not going to work for the city of Minot. It basically reaffirms what we learned when we did our feasibility study. We just don't generate enough volume, and our initial volumes are really based on a lot of assumptions. So their suggestion was what we're looking at doing, collect and haul, is the best option for us to start with. Once we get our program off the ground, get it developed, and if we can get that volume up to a higher number, it might be a viable thing in the future, but at this point it just didn't make a lot of sense. So I just wanted to relay back to you guys.
Thank you for that update, Jason. Alderman Patagula.
Which group is that? Is that the group from Jamestown, or which group? There were two I think you were negotiating with.
Alderman Padragula, that was Closed Loop Partners. That was the larger venture capital firm that's working on the nationwide.
Okay, so who says they're not interested? This large group or the smaller group?
The large group.
Okay. So these are the people who wanted to come in and make a mini processing plant?
That is correct.
And how about the group from Jamestown?
I have not spoken with the group from Jamestown. They had reached out a couple years ago. I told them just to stay in contact with us. Once we get to the point of collecting recyclables, I guess prior to the point of us collecting recyclables, we will put out an RFP. They're involved. There's 3 MRFs in Minneapolis that are also interested in our material. So that'll go out on a competitive bid, and they would be able to submit just like anybody else.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Evans.
So now that is off the table, are we back on track with the transfer station and that timeline and everything like that?
Alderwoman Evans, yes, that is correct. I'll talk to our consultant tomorrow. We were holding off on ordering a couple pieces of equipment, so we'll get those on order. The contractor had reached out today. They're talking about breaking ground on their transfer facility probably the latter part of this week or early next week. So,
great news. Thanks, Jason.
Other questions for Mr. Sorensen? Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
That is the only item under miscellaneous and discussion items. Are there any other items that need to be, Alderman Ross?
You've been here a while, right?
Yeah.
Hey, just, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to give a quick shout out to Minot State student athlete who this weekend, through his hard work and dedication on the football field, was signed to a professional contract with the Denver Broncos. Sebastian Gutierrez and his family were at the Dome this weekend, and we sat through the last few rounds of the draft with him, and right afterwards, he made that announcement to his team. He wanted to have his team there, so it was really just a cool event, and I wish him all the best of luck, and I just so happen to be a Bronco fan, so that helps too. So congrats, Seabass.
Alderwoman Evans.
That reminded me, so Minot State has brought back the presidency of the North Dakota Student Association. Christopher Scott, who's a Minot State senator, he's come and watched us a few times, was elected as the president of NDSA. So that is a huge accomplishment. We haven't had the presidency here for a while. So congratulations to Christopher, and I know he will work hard for the students in higher education in North Dakota and for Minot State.
Seeing no other business before this governing body, we're in line for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Alderman Janser, second by Alderman Pittner. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.